You know the feeling. You've spent weeks nurturing a prospect. The demo went perfectly, and they asked for the contract. Then, total silence. You follow up, but they've ghosted right at the finish line. This chart maps a standard prospect lifecycle. Leads enter at the top, but there's a significant drop-off zone right before the close. We call this the deal death valley. It's rarely a pricing issue. The pipeline stalls at these two nodes: hidden objections and a trust deficit. The common reaction to this plateau is to rely on brute force, making 50 more dials or sending 100 more automated emails. But look at what happens to the math when you just increase volume without addressing the friction. You burn through your market faster without increasing your win rate. You cannot out-volume a prospect who doesn't feel comfortable telling you why they won't sign. That requires changing the quality of the interaction itself. When the gap between a maybe and a yes is built on a lack of trust, adding more leads to the top of the funnel is the wrong tool. You need a different operating system for how you communicate. That system is Neuro-Linguistic Programming, or NLP. This illustrates how NLP functions in a professional setting. It is a method for optimizing communication to build subconscious rapport by analyzing a buyer's patterns and adapting your own to match them. To be clear, NLP in sales is often misunderstood. It is not about mind tricks or unethical manipulation. In fact, if you try to force a decision against someone's interest, the rapport breaks down. Kanav Sachdev's book, Unlocking Sales Success, provides a structured path for transitioning your sales process into this methodology. Because this framework relies on communication principles rather than scripts, it requires serious effort. You must evaluate your conversational habits and rebuild them through practice. The first component Sachdev details is achieving subconscious rapport through matching and mirroring. This matrix maps the required inputs. For rapport, the input is active tonality tracking. You have to monitor the speed, volume, and inflection of your prospect and reflect those patterns back to them. This leads to an acceleration in trust. When you match a buyer's pacing, they tend to lower their defensive guard because the interaction feels more aligned with their own processing style. The trade-off is a high initial cognitive load. You are monitoring multiple data points in real time. If you do this mechanically without focus, you'll seem disingenuous, which can end the deal immediately. It is exhausting to learn, but once mastered, it creates a connection with your buyer that competitors who simply read from a script cannot replicate. The second component of the framework is linguistic reframing. When a prospect offers an objection, responding with a logical rebuttal often hardens their position. Logic makes people think, but the actual decision is usually rooted in emotion. In our matrix, the input for reframing is internalizing specific pattern interrupts. Sachdev's series outlines how to use these linguistic structures to pause the buyer's reflexive no. The outcome is the ability to bypass a buyer's default logical defenses. This allows you to identify and neutralize the emotional root of the objection, rather than just arguing over the price. The cost here is time and ego. Learning these patterns requires weeks of awkward role-playing. You will likely stumble in practice until this new vocabulary feels natural. Sacrificing that short-term comfort is the only way to gain the linguistic skill needed to handle hidden objections effectively. Success with the system depends on how you implement it into your daily schedule. Looking at the final row of our matrix, the input is focused study. You need to block out 4 to 6 hours to read the material and take actionable notes. You cannot absorb these concepts by skimming them while multitasking. It requires an investment in your own training that most people avoid. The result is a shift in your professional standing. You move from a transactional role to one of consultative authority, where you are guiding the buyer rather than just pitching them. The ultimate trade-off is choosing to spend your time on skill development today so you can operate with a more effective system tomorrow. We can use this sales psychology matrix, mapping deal complexity against relationship depth, to see if this approach fits your specific role. If you sell simple commodities or believe sales is strictly a numbers game, you should avoid this methodology. The cognitive effort required won't provide a high enough return in low-complexity environments. However, if you are a founder or a professional managing high-ticket cycles where trust is the primary currency, you are in the top right quadrant. This skill set is a practical requirement for your success. Unlocking sales success serves as the bridge between knowing your product and understanding how a buyer's brain processes a purchase. If your deals rely on trust, staying in the brute force quadrant means you remain susceptible to the same pipeline stalls we identified at the start. You have a choice: continue losing deals to the trust deficit, or work to master the psychology of the close. Kanav Sachdev's book is the tool to navigate that transition. If you are willing to study, frustrated by generic scripts, and sell complex solutions, this is the blueprint you need. Click the link to purchase Unlocking Sales Success today. In a market where everyone has access to the same data, a psychological edge is one of the few remaining competitive advantages.